So welcome everyone. It is Friday, November 12th, and the important word there is Friday. Uh, and I think, we have to celebrate this day. I think every email I send on a Friday, I do say Happy Friday because I don't know about you guys, but these weeks are getting denser and denser as the semester goes through. And I just want to welcome you into this space. This is, we talk a lot about in this space about the space. We do a lot of kind of self-referential kind of gestures towards where we are and the boxes that we're in and where we're coming from. But ostensibly, this is a space attached to the Cachawilacuna, Andean and Amazonian Indigenous Arts and Humanities collaboration. Cachawilacuna means messages with beauty in the Quechua language. And we've been doing this with the lead principal investigator, Michelle Wibblesman from the Department of Spanish and Portuguese, and myself, Richard Fletcher, and our group of co-PIs for a few years now. But we've kind of been interested in this as a space, 1 hour to see what comes, see what happens. Sometimes we have plans, sometimes we have things we want to work on and think about together, but we often open up this space for whoever appears and comes and brings their experiences of learning and unlearning into this space. And especially in our last meeting last Friday, Michelle encouraged us to invite people to this space. And I took this a bit kind of obsessively, as I do with a lot of things, and invited the world to come here. But I'm very happy to see Brittany Wainwright, who is someone that I actively invited to be here. And Brittany, maybe we could start with you saying who you are and how you are and kind of why you wanted to be here and how it related to other places you
Sure. So I'm Brittany Wainwright, and I'm a lecturer in the Department of Arts. I am the coordinator of Foundation Studies in the Department of Art, which means that I coordinate all the beginning classes pretty much in our department. And I've been around OSU for several years. I went to grad school here. I've been here since 2014. And I was so happy to be invited to this. I will have to run early because I need to go teach, but I will stay as long as I can. And I'm really just game for any kind of community building. I think Zoom has been awful, but also really great sometimes for things like this. It's so easy to hop into a Zoom and get to know people that I wouldn't necessarily come into contact with otherwise. So thank you for having me.
Welcome. We're super excited to have you.
I mean, maybe it would be nice to have someone else who's been a regular maybe in our group to talk to Brittany about kind of some of the things that we've been doing. And then Brittany, if I could ask you also to speak a little bit about, so last week, Brittany, I came to your group before this group and was like, whoa, these people need to meet, these two Zoom spaces need to like have a conversation with each other. So maybe you could share a little bit after so Anna, Peter, Michelle, someone just, share a bit more with Brittany about what we do here. And then Brittany can share a little bit about where she's coming from. This is a mechanism to introduce. Yeah, there you go.
Hi, welcome. I'm also in the Art Education Administration and Policy Department. I'm a grad student here. And some of the things that we do in this space, we focus on, yes, Indigenous artists, right, and culture and kind of current happenings and things that are happening throughout the world. And also talk about, Richard brings in some articles and interesting artists that we look at and talk about as well. So right now we're focused on the Cassandra Press Reader, which I'm not sure Richard had a moment to talk to you about, but it is, it's an online reader that we've worked through some of the articles about indigeneity, about whiteness, about being Black as well, and these kind of intersections So we've looked at that. Sometimes we also, let's see, like, so during the pandemic, we did a whole series with Pachaisana, who's a group out of Quito, Ecuador. And we did a series of kind of like unlearning workshops with them together. So that was really great and productive and a lot of fun. So really, and then the other part too is just a space to come to and talk about what we've been learned throughout the week, share, I don't know, share things that we're going through in general, just kind of, and as well as a space to just process, you know, other things that maybe relate to our research or areas of interest. So, and if I'm probably missing a lot of stuff, so please feel free to jump in, anybody else.
I also want to say one thing about the recording. Sometimes this is a nice space for people to kind of catch up and see what we've been unlearning together. But if there's anything you want to say kind of off the recording or anything like that, we can pause at any time, because I think this is a sharing space, a caring space as well. So I think that that's really important that you all know that, and that we can do that quite easily.
Thank you for filling me in. Richard had come to our Zoom last Friday. I host a ongoing forum about teaching in the Department of Art. And it started when we all shut down and we were trying to figure out how to teach arts online. And then last year it continued, and it was like about technical teaching online stuff, but also just regular pedagogy stuff for hybrid teaching. And then this year it's turned into more of a thematic, just share space and topic theme discussion. It's mainly for the grad students and for the lecturers teaching in the department. And I feel like we give so much for our students. It's nice to have something for us. And faculty obviously are always welcome, but it's a really good casual kind of drop-in check-in. And it was one of the only ways we could chat with each other last year. And so I'm very happy to have people come into that and also be invited other places. So that's kind of where I'm coming from for today.
And I would say that one thing that, again, having experienced both groups, one thing that they share is this question of unlearning, which is, you know, how the institution of the university imposes, and these are kind of also colonial structures too, or imposes certain ways of being and ways of moving through our week and through our work together, ways which are quite alienating from certain, especially kind of artistic expressions and more expansive methodologies as well. And so I think, and Anna mentioned, sometimes in this group, we kind of think about what we unlearned in the week as a kind of check-in. And that is a space to maybe even think about a certain moment in our teaching work, in our work, you know, in the classroom as well, as students as well, thinking about how we can make space to question those structures, to challenge those structures as well. And so one thing that really came from last week in your group, Brittany, was the online space as maybe, you know, because a lot of instructors could zoom in from their studios, that there was actually a kind of more space to have an engagement with your artistic practice in the classroom at that moment. At the same time, another lecturer mentioned the idea of keeping boundaries, right? Boundaries, you know, don't let the university's kind of extractive mechanisms just, you know, pull away from your own practices and your own work and co-opt them for their ends in terms of the teaching machinery. So, you know, loads of those kinds of questions I think is something that we discuss at this in this room as well, and those elements too. So I think, you know, the way these spaces are meeting is really, really exciting. But we are meeting within structures which we can have shared moments of delinking from, which is another decolonial kind of process. this also is a space of information sharing too. So, for example, I celebrated my anniversary with my partner earlier this week, and we decided to celebrate it with an event that Michelle was putting on. So I'm looking at Michelle and I'm thinking about that experience, and thinking this can be a space to share that experience if you want to, Michelle. I don't know.
Well, I'm so honored that you chose to celebrate with us. This is really great, and congratulations. So the event that Richard and Rebecca came to last week was actually earlier this week. It's gone by so fast, right? On Monday, we had a exhibit of Andean festival costumes. And the initiative came from one of our students who has danced with some of the dance troupes and had costumes that she wanted to share with our Andean music ensemble class, since we often we focus on the music making, and we regret, that we don't have more of the costumes and more of the dance element involved. We're trying to find ways to do that. So rather than just having an event for the class itself, we decided to just create an event, and it came together very organically. It was absolutely beautiful to see the Andean Ensemble. This was their first performance, and they all did fantastic. It sounded great in the space. They all played with confidence, which is a big thing to sort of bring students to, especially students who don't have any musical experience whatsoever playing with the ensemble. And I loved how that kind of informal space brought that out in the musicians. We had a little teeny tiny musician, which was wonderful and amazing, and she was also doing some of the dancing. So just thinking about the generations and how we pass down some of this knowledge. But Anais was the student who envisioned the event. I'm always in the role of just like listening to what people envision and then trying to help them make it happen. So it was really nice to be able to facilitate that. But I loved hearing how she spoke and how different the way that she spoke was from research knowledge, right? She spoke from her own personal knowledge, and she just seemed so comfortable, sharing that, and so eager and excited to share that. She captured things about the outfits that I think research would not have captured, like the affection with which she talked about them and the care that she has taken. And I don't know, just sort of talking about the people who made the outfits and how they were so careful and affectionate, in making it. So it was really powerful for me. I enjoyed the space and the collaboration and the audience. We had dogs, we had kids, we had just everybody.
The intergenerational experience was really interesting there, and we have an intergenerational connection here, Anna and Peter. I think it's good that as people walk in, they realize, so Peter, what are you doing here? And speaking of intergenerational experiences.
That's my dad, just, yeah, in case you weren't sure, Brittany and Jared. My dad's from Toronto and is a teacher, and he's at school right now.
Yeah. So it's not only intergenerational, it's international. Yes, that's right. The Unlearning Hour is spreading.
But what do you want to learn or unlearn with your daughter, Peter? Just a small question, right?
Yeah, I'm sure I can answer that in an hour or two. Every week there's something different, and that's why I like coming to the Unlearning Hour. Is, I appreciate my own privilege. I'm aware of my own privilege, and there is a degree of guilt that goes with that. And I think that, I've looked at things in sort of a micro level, what have I benefited by, but I'm now more interested in the macro. Just, the international settler colonist movement, the history of it. I live in Canada. Canada has a very recent history, didn't become a country until 1867. And almost immediately upon its confederation, one of the first acts of Parliament was to deal with the Indigenous problem. And when I compare that, Canadians are considered forward thinking. I know last week, I forget who it was, maybe it was you, Dr. Fletcher, that mentioned something about Columbus isn't like Toronto. But one of the things that I realized was, when I thought about that, was, yeah, but we have an almost unbroken history of oppression and mistreatment of Indigenous people that I think was hidden far better than it was in the United States. It doesn't mean that the United States is less culpable. It's just they were more vocal about it. It became more of an accepted thing. What our Parliament did was said, look, we're going to marginalize the problem. We're going to move it off to the side. We're going to take care of it. We're going to assimilate. And in fact, went so far as to say we're going to take the Indian out of the Indian by our very first prime minister. And that's continued. And being a white, a descendant of white settler colonists, therefore a white settler colonist myself, I don't know that I ever dug that deeply into it until Anna. I'm not sure I ever did. So I'm kind of making up for lost time. And this is an opportunity not to share so much, but to learn. And I want to point out one thing. I simply was not aware of the issues in Brazil until Jarrett spoke about them in more detail. I didn't. I can say, oh yeah, I'm aware that they're Indigenous people. I'm aware that there must be problems. I just wasn't aware of the degree or the depth. I knew about Bolsonaro, but why didn't I know about the Indigenous? And I guess knowing more about the white guy than knowing about the Indigenous people isn't that the way history's been taught for years and years? Worry about the white guy, but Indigenous people are considered afterwards. And Jarrett, the last couple of times that you've spoken, it's prompted me every time I read the paper, every time I look through the web, especially if something comes up about Brazil, I read it and go, sparked by the Unlearning Hour. So that's why I'm here.
Well,
Oh, yeah.
it's a small world. Brittany and I just realized that we have met each other in a very different sort of setting at a birthday party of one of our good friends. So it's great to see you. I didn't realize either, but I'm so glad that you recognize me. But maybe, I don't know, I'll pass the word to Jarrett, since this may be an immediate sort of follow through with what Peter was talking about. But I did want to come back to this idea of community, so I'll pick up on that later.
Yeah, no, that I loved your comments, Peter, and that's really sweet to hear that this is like set kind of in motion, that ripple effect that I think that we all come to this space for. And I am currently actually working on a project about violence against Indigenous women in Brazil. So stay tuned for that. I will be sharing more resources as I come across them. Something else that what you said made me think of is I just started reading a book. I think it's pretty popular, pretty famous, but I don't know. It's called The Highway of Tears. And it talks about violence against Indigenous women in Canada, specifically in like British Columbia. So obviously very far from where you are, but thus far it's been amazing, and I've heard only great things about the book and the kind of work that is trying to be brought to light with all of that. But just thought I'd throw that out there in case you hadn't heard of it. I would highly recommend.
Yes, I had heard of it. I have not read it, but one of the big issues, not just in Ontario, but in British Columbia as well, has been who's going to teach this, and who's going to lead students in a discussion. And one of the blowback that has come out of this has been, well, we need Indigenous teachers to do this. We can't leave it in the hands of someone on such a delicate subject, on such a personal subject, to simply treat it as, history, or treat it as sanitized. And right now in the province that I'm in, there have been a lot of discussions among school boards to try to incorporate more Indigenous scholars, more Indigenous teachers into programs, but particularly in social studies types programs where Highway of Tears would be taught. Yeah, it's in all the libraries, it's in all the school libraries, but students aren't accessing it the way they should. And reflective teachers, particularly in British Columbia, are saying we need to find people that can adequately teach this, adequately share this.
I think that
It
specific
does make
question.
me,
Oh, sorry, Rochelle, you wanted to jump in.
yeah, no, it just makes me think about something that Asita had sort of mentioned at one of the our Unlearning hours that she attended, which is that the academics do have a role to play, and I think that that's sort of what we problematize always, right? Like, so for me, it's very interesting that sometimes, and I've experienced this more in my graduate career at University of Illinois, where we had Indigenous students, who joined the program, who were recruited into the program, but they thought they knew their communities, but they were really disconnected from their communities, so just the fact of being Indigenous doesn't necessarily, like, it doesn't necessarily mean that they speak for their community, right? Or for the experience of their communities. It's just an individual experience, right? So I wonder how we reconcile that sort of collaboration and dialogue in a sort of edifying way, where yes, we think about like the life experience that people bring, but also recognize that they're individuals and they may or may not speak for their entire communities, and that academics do have information and knowledge that sort of fills some of those holes. So I think it has to be a comprehensive conversation, not one-sided in any way. But just thinking about how different people play different roles, that could potentially contribute.
I do also think that, and I think, one thing we do here is also think, we have a focus and interest in Indigenous arts and humanities, but then how the methodologies that we learn within those fields can be extended and expanded because we are part of a settler colonial institution. And so something that might not seem related can actually be quite related to this. And the idea that our knowledge is always kind of partial, and that, that this has to be that, I think about it in my own department in relation to, graduate education or undergraduate education, like, the students are getting a whole curriculum, not just something from me. And therefore I shouldn't be expected as a professor to necessarily cover all the territory, to use that metaphor, that is covered by my colleagues, but actually to add certain approaches or elements that might kind of challenge even those methodologies as well. And so just to say that these are related issues, but they might not seem directly related. One is the space of something that we could call global Indigenous arts, means that those questions about Indigenous instructors and presence in the classroom may, and this is a concern I have, which is the importance of Indigenous led programs, Indigenous-led teaching, and so how the space of the global can somehow mean a kind of separation because no one Indigenous person is themselves is representing global indigeneity, and therefore there's that. So I'm always slightly nervous in relation to this if there's a kind of co-opting of the global to kind of undermine specificity of Indigenous presence and knowledges. The flip side of this is certain categories that get associated with the teachings of disciplinary categories within arts and humanities specifically, and how when we start thinking about artistic media and back to Brittany in relation to the foundational courses, like what is drawing, what is painting, what is sculpture, what, these kinds of issues, it might not seem that the issues are pertinent directly for Indigenous perspectives, but that, and as you know, Michelle, in your teaching, the minute you start to say music in relation to Indigenous ways of being and knowing, the whole category of music gets completely exploded. And Anna, we've been working on this in our curriculum development together in our Global Indigenous Arts Education for Settlers class, which is we may start with an artistic medium like painting or music, but immediately it gets, the minute we start to listen to Indigenous artists and their approaches, these categories start to break down. And even the craft art divide becomes kind of another mechanism for that. So those are two things that I'm kind of like hearing and thinking about, the problems and benefits of those conversations, and just sharing Michelle's position of like, there can't be kind of this one perspective, at the same time as worrying a little bit about that's a mechanism to not kind of go into that one perspective, and that specifically Indigenous perspective, in transforming our curriculum, even in disciplines which might not, so, and this could be at the level of like, what does it mean to showcase the work of an Indigenous artist within a curriculum, within a drawing curriculum, for example? What follows through with that? What commitments does the institution have to that artist, beyond them illustrating something? And when the minute we start to think like that, we're starting to think about how there's certain kind of extractionist mentalities to even the idea of the case study or the example that we use in our classes. So
I'm thinking, Richard, like a lot of the work that we do has to do with our ability to receive, right? Our ability to listen, right? Not necessarily to represent, but how do we form our students so that when we do have Indigenous voices, Indigenous artists, intellectuals come into our classes, that the students are able to hear, what they have to say. So I've been thinking a lot about that this week. I've gone all the way from like a happy que viva la fiesta textiles and Andean music on Monday to reading Theodore Adorno, which has everything to do with like the system co-opting everything and really pushing us to, I mean, he's very challenging in the sense that there is either very, very, very little space, for individual agency and resistance, or no space, like from Adorno's perspective, right? So I've had a schizophrenic week of being like depressed certain days because I read this piece for I don't know how many times I've read it, but every time it gets me a little bit down and also a little challenged, right? And then having like these really redemptive moments, coming back to our conversation about listening. So I had several of these moments this week. Anna knows, we've been reflecting on our open house for the Kausai Ukunchai Andean and Amazonian Indigenous Art and Cultural Artifacts collection. And so many things have come from that. So Anna, I saw you, explore different sort of connections with the audience, where maybe in the beginning we had done a very sort of like class-like presentation, and then when it was a general public, we had to get out of our comfort zones there, and we've had moments to practice that again with different groups, right? I've seen one of our curators, Cameron, like do a deep dive into, I don't know how many books he's read, and I said 30 last time, I think now he's up to like 45 or something like this, but it shows, right? So when he interacts with the public, the depth of his reading and engagement, even just through the literature, really shows, and it's orienting his interests and his I don't know, bringing all of these things together, with Indigenous art and artists. And then I had a really two really powerful moments. One is one of our curators, Emily, has been reflecting on this giant chalk anaconda, that emerged as a community project in the courtyard of Haggerty Hall. And it is I just so profound, so she has incorporated that into her thesis. She has written to one of our donors, Dr. Witten, for this type kind of communicating like the depth of, she says it's more meaningful to her, that project was more meaningful to her than her thesis, right? So it's a different process, right? It's a different form of engagement, I think is probably what she was referring to, but just a really profound comment and reflection on that. And then Tamron has been photographing a lot of the items, to create a database for our collection. And she was telling me about this, photographing this little figurine. It's just a doll, right? That she had not paid much attention to. I think a lot of people don't pay too much attention to. But she had been photographing this doll and came up with just this absolutely beautiful photograph that sort of reoriented her attention to some of the details in the piece. And as she was telling me about this, she nearly came to tears, right? Like it was just so moving, like this moment of appreciating the photograph and appreciating this little doll that we had sort of, it's not one of our prized possessions or anything. All of those moments are connections, all of those moments indicate that students are coming towards something and listening and appreciating in a different way. So I don't know, I just wanted to share that as things that I was touched by this week and that I celebrate. There's something happening there, right?
Michelle, one of the things that you said earlier that reminded me of this was when you were talking about the event earlier this week, and about how there was that sense of like real personal connection that was being developed that isn't so academic. And I looked through that link that you had sent me through email about the Dia de los Difuntos. And that's what I was so struck by with the videos, was this sense of, it was a bit the kind of general overview of the holiday, but in most cases, then people would go into, well, when I was younger, it ended up being this, or I have these memories of my grandma's house where we would go and do this. And it was all real personal reflection, which I thought was really just a beautiful way to convey that message.
I wonder, Jared, I mean, I'm so glad you watched the videos, just to comment on the diversity of that tradition in Latin America, not just the one focus that we tend to have in a commercial sort of realm. But I wonder if that's it, if that's the point of connection, right? That we share our personal connections to different things. Because at that point, it doesn't become as fraught, I guess, with academic sort of research. I mean, it can combine, like with the massive things on either side, but it doesn't become an issue of who is right or who's wrong. It's your experience, and it's a point of vulnerability potentially, and maybe connection, like just that, where I can see people talking about different topics across different cultures, but that personal connection of sharing something, Mhm. We've opted and Anna can speak to this, but we talked about this in our curators, group, and we've opted for the personal, like the big events. It was fun. It was very successful. It was great, but we really missed, sort of like having time to have these personal conversations with people.
Something that I was interested in spending some time with today was, again, this, we ended last session thinking about how to invite people into this space, and what that would mean. And I've been thinking about it a lot this week, and the kind of feeling of like getting to this space and there not being people that are here that have been invited, but also thinking about that doesn't mean that we can't use this space to kind of reflect on why we wanted them here, or a voice that would come into the space from different perspectives. And but also what Michelle's sharing as well, like that kind of how all of us here are within networks or connections in our work, that then we can kind of bring those perspectives in, even if they're not here too. But and then even, you know, I think in my email that I was sending out or reflecting on was about, you know, there's so much, you know, this moment that we're in within the pandemic, within our work, this moment of like, you know, the asking how we are, but also not, you know, processing, taking the time to process how we are. I just saw a call for a special issue of a journal about grief. And it's like this feeling of like, yeah, I got a lot to say about that, but, you know, not in that form, like kind of damn you for making me think of it in relation to that form. And there's a lot of those kinds of things that are thing here. So, and then also that feeling of, as I was saying, I was coming from one other meeting, I have to teach after this. And right at this moment, there is this conference, this museum I found, and I'm just going to share the screen because it's kind of funny, is called the Museum of Portable Sound. And it is just this like crazy thing in London of a museum experience that's all on a phone, and that you go to this experience and just so you see, this is like the gallery guide for this, where you have kind of object information, you hear the sound of the dolphin in the Amazon, and you know, it's like this really weird and wild kind of idea of the museum that really thinks about museums and sounds together. And they have their first conference that started just now, and I'm not there, but I'm thinking about it, and I'm thinking about how to, you know, the best thing I can do in this situation is like tell you about it, because then you might explore the Museum of Portable Sound and then encounter it yourself. But so that weird tension that happens here in this space of it's open, we can see what comes, but also that responsibility to kind of reflect on maybe things we kind of want to, or pressing things we want to say in this space too. So yeah, it's really, yeah, it's you know, so just I was just thinking about Tamara and her experience with that artwork, that piece, and then, you know, the kind of affective nature of being able to communicate that. It might feel so minor, but it's just really, really, really important. And I also don't want us to burden ourselves with this responsibility as just, you know, people that find this space useful, to think that we have to like expand and explode and like kind of be everything for everybody, because our invitations may not be met, but there might be other mechanisms whereby they're, you know, they're met. And just to know that the offer is there, I think is very important for our space here. So.
Yeah, it makes me think about, I mean, I am a real advocate of debate. I love debate, you know, and I think that sometimes students in the classroom seem a little bit shy, like they feel like debate means tension and they shy away from it. But I love a healthy debate in a classroom. And at the same time, I love sort of spaces where you feel that you are surrounded by like-minded people in a community. And I wish we had Tamara here, you know, and maybe she can join us at some point to talk about that moment. It was just a brief moment where she shared that with me. But that I know, Anna, maybe you can back me up on this, but I know that that moment is not lost, you know, on our little group of 8. That if, like, she shared it with me, but I don't know if she shared it with more people, you know. But we understand what she's talking about, and we have our own sort of moments with items in the collection that speak to that point, you know. Or it also raises our sensitivity, you know, and our understanding about how do we engage, how do we look at some of these items, you know, things like that. So I don't know what you think about that, Anna, but I, you know, again, like I like the healthy debate, different perspectives, things like that. But at the same time, it is really, really nice to have this space where I feel like if I say something, it's not going to be challenged immediately, that I don't have to get into that intellectual mode, that I can just sort of share something, even if I don't know what it means.
Tamron hasn't shared that with me yet, but we do work together outside too of the curator working group. So we're pretty close. We're working together in another class for something as well. But what was I going to say now? I just lost it. I know that Tamron too, and like other people like Amanda in our department as well, they have been saying, I want to be in the Unlearning hour. And I think it's just like this time of the semester where we're all like, it's crunch time. I feel it. And they're just busy. But I know that there are other students like in the department that want to be here and they got other stuff to do. So, but yeah, and in terms of like Tamron's like discussion about this object and like deeper connection, I think just speaks to like the ongoing dialogue about like slowing down and really, being with something intimately for a moment, maybe like silencing your phone, all these kinds of things that like to bother us, these sounds or whatever that kind of nag at us to check the email and whatnot. Yeah, I don't know. I'm definitely feeling that kind of tired at this point in the semester. Yeah,
We did that, by the way, Anna. We did that this last session with the curators that were there. We just sat with the items for a long time, not talking, not necessarily researching. We just sat there for a long time, and it was really productive. Or I don't want to turn it into like a thing, but it was really great. It felt great.
Mm-hmm. Oh. Sorry, it's loud here. I guess to a good question might be in the spirit of unlearning, not really unlearning, but like slowing down, like what at this time in the semester, but also like in the pandemic, what are you doing to relax, to focus on, to like, do self-care kind of thinking. I'm trying to think of what I'm doing now. I can't. I'm going to see a movie on the weekend. So that is something that I have been wanting to do all semester, and I've been wanting to go back to the theater, but I'm nervous too because of the pandemic, and I don't really want to wear my mask, but I will, So I guess that's one thing I'm doing, going to watch a movie.
So I wonder, Richard, as we think about, the sort of heaviness and exhaustion, maybe, like that we're feeling at this time of the semester. I mean, I feel it, but I also, I feel it mostly like in the classrooms. I'm not feeling it like in the marginal spaces. I feel invigorated by those, So I'm again, like I feel totally schizophrenic. It goes from one to the other. But maybe we can comment on that, like where it's not, for me, there is, yes, with the pandemic and different things, there are spaces that seem like they're enveloped by that. In terms of the tediousness, the tiredness at the time of the semester, which is not just pandemic related, but just usual, it seems to have certain places where it resides, and then there are these other spaces, which I'm fascinated by: the productivity, the contrast, I don't know, like the collaborative possibilities of informal spaces. I don't know. I'm like I said, I'm taken by that. I'm taken by how much of a contrast they present to like the formal spaces.
I mean, looping that into what Anna was asking us about, where are we finding like spaces or moments of self-care? I'm finding it kind of really interesting how those spaces shift depending on the week, depending on, so just to give an example, I think I arrived at our Unlearning hour last week with some concern about the space of the class of global Indigenous arts being not, not a space that I was concerned about or worried about the labor and the work that was there and what would happen. And now I arrive having had a different experience with that class on Wednesday, feeling much better about that space. And so both, nothing changed. It was still a formal teaching space, but actually it's almost like, I think I said to myself, and Anna maybe experienced this, but didn't know that this is what I was saying to myself in that class, which was, I want to hear from everybody in this class this week. I just really want to hear from everybody because, and it's a small class, it's like 7 students, but it was really important that I left that class knowing that everyone had spoken and that everyone had spoken in relation to the shared work that we're doing, which is creating this curriculum together for a future course. And there are some people in the class, and Anna is one of them, who is leading in this class. And so I feel like, and it just felt like the dynamic changed just by me going into knowing that that's what I wanted to feel from that class. So that was a moment, weirdly, of self-care for me in that space, because I was, and I think I go through a lot of this, and I go through it with our Unlearning Hour too, where I'm like, I can step back if the conditions are created and they're thoughtful and they are inclusive, then you can step back and watch and listen and engage, and that feels good. And if you try to manage everything and it gets too kind of involved in your, feelings of responsibility and also guilt, and this could extend all the way to settler colonialism, Peter, right? all the way. That if we get too bound up in that, then we're frozen and not, not doing the work that enriches us too. So it was very interesting to see the same space just be completely changed. And I don't know if Anna felt it or not, but it was very impactful, that moment.
I thought it was interesting, Michelle, what you said about debate, because debate is not argument. And what I have found with this Unlearning Hour is I may have a debate with myself. I may question things myself. I don't come from an arts background, and I don't come from, the studies, the art education that you are dealing with. I guess I came from a different era and a different time and a different discipline. But what I find is I debate with myself, or at least question and come to a resolution about things that you talk about, that you people talk about, whether it be arts. Anna and I don't argue, but we have debate. We have debate when we talk. And it opens up a whole new world for me. It really does. I didn't expect this. When I came to the Unlearning Hour, I thought, I'm not sure what to expect. I'm looking for a forum to be part of, something to be related to this. I did not expect this. I did. And that's why I like it so much. It's entirely new to me. I'm a novice at this. So I have the debate with myself, but you mentioned also unrelated, but you mentioned about the pandemic. We're in decision fatigue. It's not just pandemic fatigue. As a teacher myself, and I'm exhausted by the additional decisions that I have to make every day related to the pandemic, not the least of which is, when do I wear a mask? And the least of which, well, if I approach a student, if a student comes to me for some help, how physically close am I to that student? Is there another way of dealing with that student? I deal with hybrid classes, I deal with remote classes, and it's an entirely different way. It's exhausting. It's completely exhausting. I can hardly wait for US Thanksgiving, your Thanksgiving, because I'll be coming down and away from it for a few days, but I think people call it pandemic fatigue, but personally, I'm just tired of making choices. I'm tired of making decisions. I'd like somebody to make them for me. I'm just not sure who I would rely on. Anyway.
That's so interesting, Peter. Yes, I totally hear you there, about the exhaustion, about decisions, and just, and like it feels like small decisions somehow carry the weight of the world, you know, and so it's like this anxiety about decision making too. I totally feel that. But maybe linking sort of like the break or like spaces where something different is happening, and then also um, uh, Richard's original comment about like we're not looking to expand, but there are like-minded people out there. So I wanted to share this with y'all. I was just invited to an event at Otterbein University, and when I asked, you know, so what do you want my role in this to be? You know, how would you like to frame my participation, or what are you asking me for? They responded, we just want you to come and be immersed in the artistic experience. And I thought, oh my gosh, these are like-minded people, you know, like this is really, really exciting. So I shared with them, you know, like the different groups that we're involved with Kachawita Kuna, with the Unlearning Hour, and it's Terry Harmson at Otterbein University was fascinated by the Hour and Learning Hour. Like it immediately resonated with him. So maybe there is sort of like this expansive thing where we're kind of coming into contact with other people at other universities orienting towards similar things. So the event that they're having is with Cadine Navarro. She has an art exhibit that is called "It Sounds Like Love," and it has to do with listening to the seeds. Yeah. In some way connecting to indigenous, you know, art and epistemology, and drawing like it sounds like love, right? It clearly draws on braiding sweetgrass, and they're going to have the author of braiding sweetgrass, Kimmerer. They're going to have him up at Otterbein University in the spring. So I think this is an opportunity. We've talked a lot about that, you know, and so it's an opportunity for us to potentially get engaged. But yeah, you know, as we think about like sharing the moods that we're in or the exhaustion that we have, um, potentially reaching out and networking with other people, looking for spaces, interstitial spaces where we can take sort of a little break, you know, from all of this, and not a break as in nothing, right? But a break that seems to be constructive and productive as well. In any case, I just love this invitation. They said, no, we just want you to come and be immersed. I thought, right on.
I'm glad you mentioned Robin Kimmerer. So her work has been, you know, I have to admit, have only read the beginning of that book, but when I found out that her first book was about moss, I got really excited. I have this slight obsession about moss that maybe none of you know about. And my mother often like talks about moss, and we share our kind of stories about moss. And I remember doing cleaning in my bathroom, listening to the audiobook version of the book about moss with her reading it. And it was just, and I remember there's this Guardian article about her saying that moss will change the world. You know, if mosses are a model of how we might live. And anyway, there's something about the moss world view that, you know, so, you know, she did braiding sweetgrass and she's really famous for that and really thing, but like go look at her mossy book. And Rebecca, my partner, and my son Aneko often joke with me about creating a kind of forum that's called Mossy Goodness, which is a kind of way in which we think about moss and you know what makes us feel good. And I always think about, you know, touching moss and thinking about moss makes me feel really good. So I'm really happy to have Kimmerer introduced. And yeah, let's go see her at Otterbein. That would be amazing. Mushrooms also do something, but I think let's stick on the moss.
Well, no, because when you were talking about the moss, I was thinking of Anna Singh's recent
mushrooms, yeah.
presentation on the mushrooms, right?
Well, you went. Oh, good. I'm glad you went. I didn't go to that. Yeah.
I did. It was fantastic, and it's online if anyone is interested in looking at her most recent project. It's called Feral Atlas, and a lot of it has to do with the book that she wrote on mushrooms, you know. So yeah, it did make me think about that. Have you tried one of the kits? Like they have these amazing kits for growing mushrooms.
Oh, the mushrooms. Yeah. We've done that. Yeah, we failed the first time and then did it the second time. Yeah.
We're gonna have to look for a great kit for growing moss for you.
Well, we're at our hour, and there we go. With when we're probably always at this moment. There's even just another half an hour would be amazing. But we pause and stop and take the threads of conversations and pull them into the days ahead. And when Anna was saying about what do we do for self-care, I do think getting out into the world. I'll be hiking this weekend, and I just know that when I look at moss, I'll think of you all, and I will think, and that doesn't mean I'm thinking about work. I'm thinking about the generative space that we've created here. So thank you everyone for presence and for perspective, for what we do, and take this moment with you. Yeah. Thanks, Jared. Take care. Going to stop recording.